You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hello! Welcome back to the show if you've been here before, and welcome to the thing if it's your first time. I appreciate you either way, and I hope you enjoy this episode. John and I, as we discuss on this episode, had not conversed in depth in several years, since about 2017. And for both of us, so much has changed. So many things that, well, we get into it on this episode, so let's not rehash it here. But John's a good buddy. He's a great dude. He makes amazing pedals, and it sounds like he just has more and more coming down the pipe that everybody needs to look out for. We get into all that on the episode, so let's not rehash it here. But if you wouldn't mind indulging me for a moment, I would like to invite you to text me, to join the text chat. The number is 503-751-8577. You can text in there, and that will come directly to me. You'll have to answer a couple questions to opt into it. And if you ever feel like you don't want to be a part of it anymore, you can just text stop and leave. No harm, no foul, no feelings hurt. But what it does enable you to do is to talk directly to me. So if you have gear questions, I can answer them directly. I make a huge effort to reply to everybody on that thread. It might take me a little bit, but I always get back to everybody. So please shoot me a message through there, and I'll also send out things. I'll send out things to everybody, so everyone will get a message about something I find interesting or something I'm working on. It might be music related, it might be food related, it might just be a general update. Either way, that starts the conversation. And then we go back and forth. It's a really, really, really fun way to have a one-on-one with people that listen to this show. So if that sounds like something you'd like to do, hit me up there and we shall nerd out. All right, without further ado, let's get into this episode with my dude, John Snyder from Electronic Audio Experiments. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have a past guest who I've been needing to talk to again for a very long time, Mr. John Snyder from Electronic Audio Experiments. What's going on, dude?
Hey, everybody. It's great to finally be catching up, Blake. I am shocked that the last time I was on this show was 2017. It feels like a completely different person who was on that show, so it's going to be good to catch up.
I can't hardly believe this. We were starting to talk about some of this off the air, but I mean, 2017, I wasn't even full time yet. You know, I was still doing that, as the side hustle. So, and I've been doing it full time for a while. So it's really, really trippy to think back that far. But for some reason, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know, but you've had so many different things change. We got to just probably start from, I guess, where we left off then. I think at that point you were still in grad school doing super smart guy, stuff, and also doing pedal stuff. And I think sending had maybe just barely been a thing. Your delay.
Yep. We were just in the process of getting ready to release that. Little did I know it was going to take another 4 to 6 months to get that one out the door. Mm-hmm. So 2017, I was right in the middle of my PhD program, which I did not finish. I didn't defend my thesis until May 2020. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how long I was languishing there. I mean, it is fairly normal for an engineering PhD. About 5 years is what it takes. You take classes for a year, 2 years, and then it's just full-time research with a bit of teaching on the side until you put together some stuff that they deem worthy of writing a thesis on. and then you write the thesis. Of course, we had a bit of a unique twist this year, didn't we? So
yeah, a big old wrench thrown right into everybody's gears.
So to give you the short version, I was making this device. I had to spend many hours in a clean room making this device. It was a little chip where you could shine light in one end with a laser, and then when it comes out the other end, it's got useful properties for quantum optics. And so to test these devices, we needed this very fancy laser that we had to order about 2 years in advance, and it showed up in the third week of February 2020. So I was all geared up to do my, sort of the final victory lap of this project I'd been working on. And we got the laser calibrated. And then about the second week of March, they closed the doors of the lab. And so basically I had to just pick up the pieces and write a thesis of what I could. And so I did. So it took about a month of just sitting there, waking up every single morning, drinking an entire pot of coffee, typing frantically like a madman. And then I had my 150-page or so thesis, defended that in May. And then I was like, all right, well, let's go get a real job. That's what it's time to do, right? And of course, usually it's pretty customary to line up interviews and things like that in your last, like basically while you're writing a thesis or when you're going to be writing and defending, it's all scheduled. And then nobody called me back. Nobody was calling anybody back, as it turns out. And I said, well, geez, okay. So I've been doing this pedal thing on the side for quite a while now. That was coming up on like basically the 5-year mark. That summer would be summer 2020 was the 5-year anniversary from the first batch of hand finished, hand painted, hand drilled, very crappy longsword version 1s. And so I said, all right, well, I'll build pedals for a bit while I interview for jobs. And I said I'd give myself like 3 months. 3 months turned into 6 months. 6 months turned into almost a year. At that point, I said, well, shoot, I need to get a shop because I can't do all this by myself. I can't be packing orders on my kitchen table. And so we found a little pocket of commercial space right here in Boston in this artist building. And here we are, building pedals. Got, 2 or 3 folks, depending on who's making records or who's on tour, in here with me. And we're just doing the dang thing,
Is it weird that you spent so much time, from my very, very surface level understanding in some really advanced engineering stuff? I mean, you said the word quantum, that means it's advanced to me, to be going in I don't want to say like less technical because it can get pretty weird
for sure,
but into what I would imagine for you is a less technical area of work. How does that feel? Is that a weird thing?
I think it's all very subjective in some ways, but the one thing that's not subjective is really the depth. When you get a PhD, the idea is that you have gone deeper than any one person has into just a hyper obscure subfield of a subfield of a subfield of research. Mm-hmm. And so for about a 6-month span, I was the leading world expert in this one type of chip that can only be made in like 3 or 4 labs across the globe. And it's so obscure that most people weren't even really interested in it, but that's just what happens. And somebody somewhere might say, oh, there's a technique in this paper that I can use for my research that this one guy just obsessed over for an inordinately long amount of time. So in comparison, building pedals, you've got to know a little bit about a lot of things. And when you want to run a pedal business, you've got to know a little bit about even more things. And so, I can obsess over the electronics of a guitar pedal all day, every day. But the fact of the matter is, if I can't do my taxes and handle supply chain related things and pay people and do all these things and try to run a healthy business, then I'm stuck. And so it's that breadth, that's the breadth that gets you, right?
Right.
Not like, it's almost liberating to be able to just hyper focus on one thing for as long as you possibly can. But managing all those little details is every bit as complex, in my opinion.
Interesting. That's fascinating because I'm much more, I don't want to say experienced, but I guess I'm much more experienced with that general stuff, the running a business. I mean, a lot of people think that I'm just here by myself, which is true most of the time, but I'm also involved in a lot of other things. And so those complexities of like trying to figure out business things, whether that's hiring, whether that's personnel issues, whether that's branding, whether that's whatever. I'm very, very familiar with that for a variety of different reasons.
Sure.
So to hear you describe, because I couldn't begin to wrap my brain around what you were doing for your PhD. There's no way. Like, I know you're like just kind of surface level scratching it, because like I barely would understand it. But it's interesting to hear you compare the two in that way. I would never have imagined that it would be, I guess, as intellectually stimulating as what you were doing before.
Sure, it's just all just different flavors of the same thing. I mean, it's just to me, it really is a testament to how much, how deep you can get into something if you are allowed to focus on it with no other distractions. Mm-hmm. Which is, that's one of the rare luxuries of academia, for all of its flaws and its problems and such. Having that opportunity was really special. But that being said, I like being able to actually think a little bigger rather than just drilling really, really deep into something.
So I know, just because, of different chats we've had, over the years, more in the past, but definitely prior to you making this big leap, you were really wrestling with whether you should go further with the pedal business at one point or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Was it seriously just like the lack of jobs, I guess, in that field that pushed you to that point? Or did you just finally feel comfortable, like, okay, it's been 5 years, the demand's been fairly consistent, I think I can actually do this? What really pushed you there?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, we all know that the guitar gear industry, the musical instrument industry as a whole, had a real blockbuster year, and that was absolutely a factor. I said, well, shoot, if I can pay the bills doing this, and have a job where I know I can safely work from home because I'm just here huffing solder fumes, I can try this out and see where things go. And it's pretty customary for folks to take a little break after they finish grad school and just sort of take time to reassess and think about what they're doing. So I always thought it was temporary. And then it was my wife who said, "You're really enjoying this. You're pretty good at it, and you seem really happy." And so I said, "Yeah, you're right. Maybe I should just put the job applications down for a little bit, for a little while, and see what happens there." So that's been, that was a very positive experience. And then it was moving into the shop that really took the brakes off the whole thing. That was when I said, okay, look, we've saved up some money. We've got operating expenses. We've got a business plan, which it literally was harder for me to write the business plan than it was for me to write my thesis, because my thesis was taking a bunch of notes that I had compiled over 5 years and translating it into a cohesive story. Writing a business plan was like learning a new language and then having to write my thesis in that language. It was really alien. I know there are folks who are way, way better at this than I am, but I went for it. And that was it. Like, once we got it all solidified, I said, all right, let's go. Let's just see what happens.
What I think is really cool about your brand in general is, like, you've really opened yourself up. You don't have to just do pedals. It's literally electronic audio experiments. So are you looking at amplifiers or anything outside of pedals?
It's very funny you mentioned that, because that was the exact intent of the name, was to leave the doors open. My mentor when I first started was Nick at Dunwich Amps, who is really brilliant. He and I have a lot in common. I looked up to him. I mean, I still look up to him. He's great. But he also is in academia while building pedals, and I was very inspired by that. And he was doing amps and pedals. And I said, well, shoot, I would love to do what this guy's doing. Turns out making tube amps commercially is really freaking hard.
Yes, so hard.
I've had great conversations with many folks who are doing this. Like, for instance, I'm good friends with Alex over at Science Amps, and the amount of work that he's done to make his amps be practical for production is fascinating. The amount of redundancy that he's built into his chassis, his power supplies, designing circuit boards that you can build an amp on and still trust it to be reliable at high voltages, on the road, etc. Enormous amount of work. I'd love to dive into that someday. I see pedals as very much a guitar flavored springboard into other forms of audio. And we do have loose plans for Eurorack stuff eventually. I've got a couple of pro audio ideas I would love to do, even if it was just like, here's a mic preamp that is just my flavor. I think would be really fun to do. Are those markets going to be as vibrant as pedals? Probably not. But at least it would be very edifying to be able to dip a toe into those different fields. So yeah, Pro Audio, Eurorack, maybe someday Hi-Fi. I've got a phono preamp design I've been sitting on for like 2 to 3 years in collaboration with a buddy of mine who used to be a hi-fi repair guy here in Boston. So someday, now that we've got the shop and people in the same place, the ideas are really starting to bubble back to the surface and we can chart our paths forward.
Do you ever see yourself revisiting, and maybe we should actually dive into a little more specifically what you were studying so that people can have a better idea and I can have a better idea of it. But do you ever see yourself kind of diverting course and going back to what you originally studied?
That's a good question. I think a lot of what I was studying was so niche that I think that personally, I think that if someone were to take those ideas in a different direction, they would have to use a different technology. A big part of my thesis was basically saying, hey, we've got this process called periodic polling, which basically means that you zap a crystal in certain positions so that its electric charges are pointing in a certain direction. And if it's pointing up and then down, back and forth along a line, you can change the characteristics of light. The problem is I had to do that in 1 micron sized strips, which is at the time of my thesis was the smallest demonstration of this technique. And we have a lot of reason to believe that 1 micron is about the theoretical limit. So there's probably not any more direction you can go with that type of material in the crystals I was using with the process I was using. So maybe somebody else will take it and run with it. Personally, I kind of feel like I've done my time with it. That said, I do kind of miss quantum optics. I miss being in a clean room to some extent. But I would say I wouldn't mind using some of those skills I developed in a more audio flavored scenario. So I can tell you what my pipe dream is someday. So, there are companies out there like, X5, Cool Audio, Sound Semiconductor, Alpha, ALFA over in Latvia. These are all companies that make semiconductors in-house for the audio market. And so you've got reproductions of old bucket brigade chips and old synthesizer module, like some of these chips that were like a whole synth voice in like one little package, right? Or like an attack decay envelope in one little package. And all of these things are really cool and really useful, but there's not a lot of production capacity for them because they all use techniques that have largely been forgotten because, this was state of the art in the 60s and 70s. And so the folks who are making this are using old equipment repurposed from that era and old, production drawings from that era. And, it's getting to be a dying technology. And if we want to keep analog alive, there's an argument to be made for still putting more investment into some of those things. Now, the problem is if you want to open up a clean room, you're talking, well into the 7 figures for upfront operating expenses. And that's not an amount of money I will ever see in my lifetime. So like I said, it's a pipe dream, but man, it would be so cool to get into the IC side of things. Mm-hmm. Maybe someday, but it's fun to think about.
Hey, you never know what's going to happen. I never thought I would get to do this. I never thought I would have the opportunity to meet and hang out and do things with the people that I've done today. And I think you could probably say the same thing about yourself. So, maybe it's a pipe dream, but if it's there, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Those companies did it somehow.
It's true. So, well, if any investors want to send me back into a clean room so that we can make some new BBDs, let me know. It sounds like a good time.
So that actually, you're the perfect person to talk about this with, because I'm obviously out of my depth when it comes to this. But I've heard the argument before that BBDs are technically not analog. Ooh. What do you think about that?
I was just diving into this argument about 2 weeks ago. I think it's Jack.
Well, and we should probably clarify for not everybody's quite as nerdy as we are. BBDs are bucket brigade delays. So this is a specific chip that is used mostly in analog delays. Just for those who might be confused at the terms we're using, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I was most recently reading Jack Orman kind of go off about this on his website, and Jack Orman has a site called AMZ Effects, which is one of like the most long-standing DIY info hubs in the internet. Definitely on the list of guys I'd love to have a beer or two with. And he feels very strongly about this issue, and I was like, this is interesting. Personally, I'll just lead by saying I believe that BBDs are analog. However, they're not quite all the way analog. And the reason why is that, when you're talking about a digital signal, you've kind of got two types of what's called quantization. Quantization is breaking a thing that is continuous, aka infinitely variable, into a discrete limited number of chunks. And so your two chunks of a digital signal are going to be the sample rate, which is how many times you're taking a snapshot per second. And then the bit depth, which is, if you're looking at the smallest signal and the biggest signal, how many steps are you allowed to have? Mm-hmm. And so in a BBD, you do have a sample rate. In fact, since you have a fixed number of samples within a bucket brigade chip, the clock is going to determine your delay time because you're passing the signal down these buckets. And for a slower clock, it's going to live in the buckets for longer. For a faster clock, it's going to go through the buckets faster. And so that's part of the sound of digital or analog delays, especially at long times, is that you're changing the sample rate. And so that's part of the sound. So a very degraded analog delay repeat is going to be at a low sample rate, which with all the filtering and other stuff going on sounds very pleasing to the human ear for whatever reason. Now, the thing that's important is that the signal is still continuous in its amplitude because it's just the analog voltage at some snapshot in time is being stored. So it's not all the way into digital, but because there's a clock, a lot of the rules about digital audio and digital signal processing still apply. So I'm gonna say it's analog, but I totally get why folks are saying that it's not analog. Maybe I'm a bit of a fence sitter here, but I like the weird nuances that sort of emerge when you're having these kinds of discussions. Because what the heck is it? I've heard the term discrete time analog be used, and I think that's a pretty valuable middle ground, so to speak.
Right. That's fascinating. That helps me understand it a lot better because I think I could build a fuzz face if you asked me to, but that's about as advanced as my electronic knowledge gets. So thank you for that. That was very, very helpful.
Yeah, of course.
So another thing that I think a lot of people aren't aware of is, and this might be, I don't know how much you can go into detail on this, so just tell me to shut up if that's the case, but you have an interesting relationship with Bill Finnegan, who famously, designed the original Klon and the KTR. Seems like you guys are doing some things together. I'm not sure how much of that is. I know some of it's public because I saw it publicly, but I'm not sure how much of that you can go into.
Sure. So I'll give you as much as the story as is fit to print. So let's see here. I met Bill in about 2016 or 2017. I think it was not so far off from the last time I was on this show. Before I met him, I had a vague understanding that he was in the Boston area, and he was just a sort of cryptid to me. He's a very private person and, kind of keeps to himself. But of course, his product had a lot of notoriety. And my friend Adam, who runs, he and his wife run a pedal pop-up shop here in Boston called Stompbox Sonic, who I highly recommend. Anybody in the Boston area, please buy your pedals from them. They're the loveliest humans on the planet. Adam was one of the folks who would come over to help build Centaurs at Bill's house. And so, because, Bill was building Centaurs 16 at a time on his folding card table. Everybody's read that Premier Guitar article. So he needed a little bit of help here and there. And he kind of would contact local musicians in that regard. So he still sort of does that to an extent, is that, he's got a lot of close ties to the community if you know him. And at the time we met, it was actually Doug Tuttle at Midfi Electronics who put the two of us in touch. And Doug and I go way back. We met at a Stompbox Sonic event. So as you can see, all the pieces are starting to come together.
Right.
For a big city, Boston's kind of a small town. So Bill needed help with this test jig that a former assistant of his had put together. It's a really clever sort of go, no-go box. Bill's rationale was somebody should be able to stumble into work hungover, plug a KTR into this thing, push the button on it, and it'll tell them if the KTR is working or not. And there's a little graphic on there that tells you, set the KTR to these knob positions, push the button, and it runs a test, and it'll step through these various tests. And there's no screen on it. There's just some lights and a buzzer that will beep at you if the unit passes or fails. It's extremely clever, and it works really well. The problem is that he only had one of them, and it was starting to fall apart. And so the former engineer who had worked on it was no longer available, and so I basically had to reverse engineer it and then build 3 more of them. And in the process of that, became good friends with Bill. And I learned a lot about him in that process. I learned that he is very picky. Of course, you could probably discern that from his products. And
Right.
he knows very well what he's talking about, because when he wants something, he has to understand all the little details that go into that thing. So that way he can do it in the way that he wants to. And if something changes, he can adapt to those changes. But a lot of folks, the downside of this, and I say this with admiration, is that it can be very hard to delegate when you're somebody who wants to understand all of the nuts and bolts of the thing that you're doing. And that's why he was the kind of person who would go on Craigslist, couldn't find the pedal he wanted, and then hired a freaking MIT guy to help him with this R&D and realize his vision. And he knows exactly what he wants, but he doesn't always know the steps to get there, and that's where other folks kind of help him out. So we've all heard about the diode situation with the KTR. Bill bought up this particular manufacturer of 1N34A diode in the early 90s, and I don't think at the time he expected he was going to sell well over 10,000 units of this product. The Centaur, what was it, 8,000 Centaurs, and then however many KTRs came after that, I'm not even sure the number. But, at the time, he was not expecting this product to be a smash hit with a cult following. And so he just went with this diode that in the circuit as designed he thought sounded the best. And so, of course, this mystique developed about it. There's the whole magic diode thing, people on forums trying to reverse engineer it, blah, blah, blah. But
people on forums being weird about something. I've never heard of such things.
It's people were tantalized and infuriated, and I think there is definitely an element of folks who feel threatened by the fact that Bill has always marched to the beat of his own drum, and that that's not everyone can go through life living that way. Just really, not at all caring what other folks think. He's just doing his thing. So all this to say, with this diode supply running out, Bill contacted me and basically said, "Hey, you work in a clean room. Do you think we can make more of these?" And I said, "Good luck with that." I did
Right.
I did actually put together a proposal for doing a type of semiconductor analysis on these diodes, so that we could figure out how they were constructed and perhaps contract a fab to make more with similar specs. But unfortunately, that process would cost more than anybody has made off of any guitar pedal ever. If you want to make custom semiconductors, you better be in the graphics card industry or working for a military contractor or somebody with a lot of money to throw around, because the musical instrument industry is not it. We've always gone the other way around and done more of a swords to plowshares type of thing, especially when it comes to old germanium parts. So,
of course.
And what's more, Bill did not want to reveal the fact that he was running low on diodes, because there was always the chance that somebody would figure out what they were and then kind of end run the whole process and take away what he sort of felt like was the last remaining thing with all of these Klon clones on the market, sort of the last remaining thing that made the real genuine article. I personally think that even if somebody did manage to get those exact diodes, there's still value in supporting the originator of that design. But I could see where he was coming from, feeling it as like an existential threat to the brand. That my words, not his. Like he's been remarkably calm about the whole thing, and I was the one over here being like, "Dude, what are you going to do when you run out of these diodes?"
Right.
And I did tell him early on. I was like, "Look, I know these diodes have a special sound to them because I've observed it myself." Oh, there goes the train. Sorry, the train goes by in this place, and it's really loud. The train tracks are right out the door.
That is actually vintage Tone Mob. I used to have train sounds on my side all the time when I was recording in the Fuel Lab. And so now we're doing a throwback. Now we've got train sounds again.
Amazing.
Vintage episode.
Anyway, so Bill had, early on, kind of expressed that, he wanted to impress upon me that these diodes were different. And it didn't take long for me to observe that firsthand, both with equipment and also even just listening to two side by side. And, but I did say, look, I don't believe these diodes are inherently magical. I think that if you find the right way to massage the circuit, you would be able to get the same sound. The catch was he had many populated circuit boards, which needed to be adapted in order to work correctly with whatever diodes come in. And so that meant that it became an Apollo 13 situation, because we had to be able to using existing circuit boards, populate the board with components that would make the pedals sound the same with different diodes in there. And we did manage to pull it off. It took about 3 to 4 months of, him coming over here once a week. We would hook up, he's got that Centaur board with every part socketed. We would modify that. We would modify KTRs and just hook them up to my spectrum analyzer, hook them up to distortion analyzer. I'd set up double blind tests, which was always really fun. And we finally got there. So just, ultimately within the confines of the original circuit, we were able to get the sound to be the same with these diodes. Now, here's the thing that's most interesting to me about all this, is that not a lot of people use the Klon or KTR circuit at maximum gain, which is where the diodes are mostly doing their thing. A lot of people use it as a regular old run-of-the-mill clean boost, which is a role where it excels. But in that most famous use case, the diodes are barely even engaged in the circuit at all.
Exactly.
So, and this really speaks to Bill's attention to detail, in my opinion, because even myself, I would have been like, well, if only 10% of my users are turning the gain knob all the way up on this thing, I'm just going to write it off as, okay, cool, the product has changed. And he was so devoted to just, maintaining the original sound of the unit, regardless of the use cases that people were going for, that he went through all this trouble. And that might very well speak to a, not a bad business sense, but like, I think a lot of folks who are well-versed in business might say, dude, you got to let this one go. But he kept on soldiering on, and he was able to get the result that he was looking for by, basically listening really, really carefully and, working through the problem systematically with my help. So it was a really valuable learning experience. For my takeaway was get all the germanium out of all my products as soon as possible. But it did work out. And I can't pick those two units apart. With the component changes in there, you can rig up a double blind test, and I personally cannot hear the difference. And Bill can still hear like one or two things, but I think he'll live.
Right.
So
he's like, okay, I guess this is going to work. Yeah, that is hilarious. And I've tried to explain that to people before, that, you're using this essentially as a clean to clean-ish boost. And we're talking about clipping diodes here.
Yes.
Like literally clipping, which hardly anybody uses a Klon circuit for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always find it hilarious when people, obsess over those things that they don't even use.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I say this as somebody who is in that minority who really likes the sound of a Klon running at full tilt. That's how I have historically used it. And then I'll usually put, I like to use it in front of one of our halberd drives and just absolutely just punish the front end of the halberd with that extra focused mid-range. Works really well. It's heavy. It's even kind of like got that, almost, like wire flavor, like that really like spiky kind of blown out guitar tone. I love it. So, there's use case in there for everybody.
You've always been a really interesting person to me, because when I talk to you, you're very intelligent. You come from the academia world, you're very well spoken, and you love noisy, insane music.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't think that you find that cross section or that crossover very often, or maybe I'm mistaken. Do you have a lot of friends from the academic world that also like, noise rock?
Honestly, I was one of the only people in my department who even really cared that much about guitar music. So maybe I am just a bit of an oddball. Hard to say, really. Nobody knows, least of all me, where my music taste ultimately came from. But I think it might have just been a result of going to a basement show when I was a kid at just the right time and saying, "Wow, this is the stuff." And
Right.
you go to a punk show in some random suburban basement, and sometimes it's terrible. And every once in a while, you get a band that just rips, and it's like the noisiest thing you've heard in your life. The PA doesn't work right, so it's just all guitar and crash cymbals. But hey, if it works, it works. I don't know.
I've got a band for you.
All
by
right.
the way, the guitarist and frontman was just on the podcast. They're called Glitchers, and they're from the UK. And it's this dude and his partner.
Mm-hmm.
She's on drums. He's on guitar. He's plugged into some random Black Star amp with some random cab that he doesn't even remember where it came from. And what they do is they go play shows out on the street.
Oh, sick.
They like busk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like super abrasive. I mean, it's so good. It's so awesome. And like listening to their recordings, which he does all himself,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, on like with this amp and the drums and like GarageBand.
Amazing.
And it sounds incredible. And they've started to get this cult following because they keep playing. They'll do like 15 or 20-minute shows in like shopping districts.
Mm-hmm.
And people are and like after bigger bands, like they've went to like Idols concerts and just played on the sidewalk.
Oh, that's
like
perfect. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Idols is a band I'm a huge fan of.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. But the Glitchers, I just love that they're, in the days of social media, we're all so focused on, regardless of what project you're doing, you're trying to get people's attention as they're scrolling on by. You're trying to get people's attention to your product or your music or your project, whatever it is. And they have figured out a way that like you're gonna pay attention. They just show up and they don't do it for so long that it's an impediment to somebody, but you're gonna pay attention to them for those 10 to 15 minutes that they're playing. And in a way that you wouldn't maybe a bucket drummer or an acoustic guitar.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Thing. So it's pretty rad. You definitely should check out Glitchers.
I'm absolutely going to. That's right. That sounds right up my alley. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of a performance that had a huge impact on me when I was younger. And I really like telling the story now because one of the members of this band is my graphic designer, Zach, who does all of the fonts and layouts for our pedals and merchandise and that sort of thing, and has been doing a lot of our assembly for a long time as well. He was in this band called Surtse, which was this punk band out of Boston. And I remember circa about 2011, I was in college. I was having a very miserable semester. I just gotten dumped. And, I was just doing the old scrolling thing. And I come across this video of a band playing in a laundry room. And it was Zach's band Surtse, just packed in the laundry room of this brownstone in Back Bay, Boston, absolutely ripping a 10-minute set that had it was like 5 or 6 songs crammed into 10 minutes. And it was just the most ferocious set of music I had seen in my life. I'd listened to heavy music before. I'd been to my share of, Warped Tours and stuff like that. But this was on some kind of other level. And in that very brief interaction, I was like, not only is this band amazing, but I also want to be friends with them. And it, worked out. Zach and I have been friends for a very long time, but I was just so blown away by that. So sometimes you just got to be really loud and noisy to get folks' attention. It seems like I'm glad to hear that approach is still so successful.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, they've gotten a bunch of viral videos, and the cops will come up and tell them to be quiet, and they're like, "We will in a little bit." That's awesome though. Can you spell that band name for the listeners?
Surtse. It's spelled Cerce.
Okay, sweet. I'm gonna have to look that up later.
They're
That's
amazing.
very cool.
Highly recommend them.
So your product lineup, I know you've traditionally done everything kind of in batches because you had to. So you were, building them in your kitchen or whatever. You are kind of limited by what you can produce. Are things continually available now to the degree of which that is possible given the supply chains these days? Or how are you handling sales and things like that?
So we're getting very, very close to having everything continuously available. historically what would happen was I'd have a lull in activity at school. I'd place a big order for parts. I'd build what I could, basically nights and weekends, or I'd have, a friend help me out with just like the final assembly. There were plenty of times where I would just drop ship a big Mauser cart of parts to Brad at Nerd Knuckles' house, and he would help me with assembly too. And, and then I would just say, all right, this is going up at this time and place, but we were never making enough. It was, just because there wasn't really enough time, not a lot of resources. I didn't want to, take out a line of credit to get a bunch of parts to do a big production batch. And so we would just have things when they were available. And eventually we were sort of, kind of bootstrapping our way up to bigger production batches of, instead of 20 to 30 pedals at a time, which is where I was the last time we spoke, we were getting closer to, 100 pedals at a time, which was sort of the platonic ideal at the time. And, eventually I was like, okay, we got to figure out how to get more models in place. And a lot of that was just like building up business acumen and developing good relationships with contract manufacturers and making everything as quick and easy to assemble as possible. That was a big part of my quarantine project, was basically to redesign the entire lineup so that everything, there's no wires in the final assembly, but it's still rugged, which is easier said than done. It took me a long time to find, plug-in cables that stay if you, take the pedal out on the road and beat it up for a while. Or, circuit board mounted jacks that are still, metal and grounded. Like little details that I was so concerned about and wanted to get just right. But also didn't want to pay an arm and a leg for, because, we had a price point we wanted to follow. And so doing all those things, making it as efficient as possible, we were like, all right, let's go. Let's build as many pedals as we can. And then, of course, the supply chain is starting to be an absolute mess. But at this point, I can say that we've got long swords in stock. We've got model FETs in stock. We've got daggers usually in stock. We're very close to having halberds regularly in stock. I don't know when this episode is coming out, but Halberd V2 is going to be out on Tuesday, the 21st, which is very exciting. We're surprised dropping that out of nowhere. So blast from the past. And that's another one we've been, we had to do. That was actually the one where I said, okay, we got to get the germanium out of this thing so that we can make it in more reasonable production quantities. It had a germanium transistor in it, and we would have to hand test and hand bias every single one, and it just took a long time, and we had a surprising number of rejected transistors in that circuit. So we were able to button all that up, and that's regularly available. The next thing that we're trying to kind of get in more regular availability is Hypersleep, which is our analog reverb. But those chips are really, really hard to find. So we're going to do the best we can with those. But I suspect that one will eventually get new life as a DSP product. Whenever we run out of those chips, I'm going to try to emulate the behavior of that chip, keep as much of the circuitry analog as possible, then do Hypersleep 2, this time more affordable or what have you. So, but yeah, we're getting closer, and we've been able to get more retailers too, which is huge.
Well, now I've got to be watching out for that Hypersleep drop, because that's a pedal I played, I think, the prototype of it at one of the Fear the Riff expos. Mm-hmm. And I've never been able to forget about it. Like always been like, I've got to grab one of these. So now that even though I know that if you do end up going DSP, knowing you, it's going to sound exactly the same. I still, like, part of me is like, I was there from the beginning. I need to have the original because I'm a nerd like that.
Well, you haven't even heard that version. I was like, oh yeah, we're coming out with this thing in like 3 months, and I couldn't. That prototype was like unusably noisy.
It was very noisy.
It took like another 2 years of me learning how to design power supplies to make one that wasn't noisy. Because if you put that pedal in the same signal chain as a really high gain fuzz or something like that, it squealed uncontrollably. So that one, that was like, I think Fear the Rift 2016 was when you came out. And we didn't release the first batch of Hypersleeps until I think 2019. So it took a really long time to figure out how to get that one right. And the biggest problem was actually, so a lot of BBDs are happier at 15 volts rather than the standard 9 volt pedal supply. And the most common way to get a 15 volt pedal supply is to use a thing called a charge pump, which is you basically have a switch that turns on and off very, very quickly, and it charges up a capacitor also very quickly. And you can basically stack the pedal voltage on itself over again, and you can double the voltage, or you can invert the voltage, and there's all kinds of uses for these. The problem was that the frequency of a charge pump is comparable to the frequency of a BBD clock. And if you've got two clocks that are very close to one another, you get a phenomenon called heterodyning, which is how you decode audio from a radio transmission. It's the same idea. And so if those clocks are off each other by just a little bit, then you can get squealing that is in the audio range, even if the clocks themselves are much higher frequency than audio. So it made it unusably noisy, and we had to do a completely different power supply in order to make it work correctly. So that was why that one took so long, because I had to learn how to design a boost converter, which is a whole other beast. But now it's that's something it was worth the time it took, but I wish it had been a little faster.
I remember you telling me that too. I was like, when is this going to come out? Oh, like 3 months. and then when it finally did come out, I was like, is that the same? Is that the same? That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Basically in name only.
Oh, wow. So I imagine it hit the sonic characteristics you were shooting for with the original, but had to just be a completely different layout, everything.
Oh,
basically.
Yeah. And it took a long time to just, I realized in that process why all the pedals using that Bucket Brigade chip that came out in the late 70s, early 80s were all commercial failures, because they were all unusably noisy too.
What are some of the other ones that came out with it?
So there was the DoD FX45, which, despite it being noisy, I do really like. That one. The problem with there was that one, which, it doesn't, even though it has two of those chips in it, you'd think it would have more reverb time, but it basically sounds like a lo-fi room reverb. Cool sound, but not the like sort of washy grittiness of the Hypersleep. And then there was the Morley, which I still haven't been able to get my hands on, but one of my old friends, my hometown, uses one in his band. And that one, similar idea, kind of sounds like a room reverb, not very like big and washy. And then there is the EHX solid state reverb, which is one of the holy grail EHX pedals. I suppose at this point I should shout out my friend Dan Danger, who has an enormous EHX collection. He's based out in Western Mass and has this studio where it's just floor to ceiling display cases full of EHX pedals. I think he's got every single pedal that was built pre-1990 and all kinds of weird collector stuff. He's got prototypes. He actually has two of the solid state reverbs, which is an enormous accomplishment because only a few dozen were made. It never made it to production. But
wow.
It sounds absolutely incredible. And that pedal was one of the inspirations for the Hypersleep. We didn't clone it, but it was playing that one when I said, oh, these chips actually do have something worthwhile. Because I had played the Morley, I had played, heard my friend's Morley, I had played a DoD FX45, and I was like, not really that interesting. Digital reverb is better. But then I played this EHX and I was like, oh, wow, this thing is really, really cool. What makes this special? And it turns out that they were just clocking the chip more aggressively to get longer times out of it. And it just opened up this whole new sonic world. But yeah, good luck finding one of those solid state reverbs. They basically do not exist. They're incredibly rare. But if you ever do see one, at least play it because wow.
If I see one and I can afford it, I'll probably just buy it.
I'm actually afraid to ask what they're worth, but they are very cool. But yeah, all that to say, as a side note, these were all coming out at the dawn of digital reverb. And so everyone, you would play one of these and then you would play, an early Alesis unit or, if you were lucky, an old Lexicon. And it was, either you're getting more of the same thing or you were getting this whole new universe of tones that was ushering in whole new genres of music at the time. So, it's obvious why digital reverb won out when it did. But these are cool little historical relics.
It's an interesting thing too, and it ties back into our previous Bucket Brigade discussion, where if you ask a lot of people, they'll say that analog reverb only exists in the form of a room or a canyon or something of that nature. So it's interesting to think, everyone knows about analog delay. Everyone knows that that's a thing.
Right.
But no one thinks about it in reverb terms, which is kind of interesting. But I've tried to explain to people before that reverb is essentially kind of like delay. That's what people don't fully understand. The EQD Afterneath, the description of that product was what made me first understand what reverb was.
Oh yeah.
It's just a bunch of early reflections, and it's the sound of sound bouncing around.
Yeah, it's neat.
Really,
I think one of the reverb algorithms on the Mood is a similar thing. And, Dan at Old Blood Noise is certainly somebody who can speak to this sort of thing very well, where it's like, that and the Afterneath share this quality of, okay, you're starting off with these like discrete echoes ping-ponging around, and then as you turn them up, they start to smear into one another. And it's an educational tool just as much as it is a sound design tool. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, the original Afterneath was first EQD pedal I ever bought.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
That's a good first one.
That was a long time ago. That's so weird to even think about. One thing we haven't really touched on too much is the pedal that I have, which is actually one of my favorite pedals, period, but definitely one of my favorite dirt pedals, is the Model FET.
Oh, thanks.
Man, that thing is so good. I just had this memory that I bought one of the prototypes from you. I don't remember which prototype it was. And then I got what at the time was the latest version. And then I sent the prototype to somebody and I don't remember where it went. I'm just having this strange realization that I have no idea where that pedal is.
That's what happens sometimes. I can't tell you how many prototypes of mine have just floated away into the ether. Just hope they're being put to good use, I guess. But yeah, that's I'm glad you're still getting mileage out of that one. That's a product that we've very lightly refreshed every so often. As part of our big product redesign. Like basically last year. One of the things I did was just beef up reliability. So like with that pedal, I was like, okay, this sounds exactly the way I want it to. But we did have some folks who were killing it with incorrect power supplies every once in a while. Someone would say, oh, well, the dip switch on my power supply got bumped into the 18 volt position and I plugged it in and pop, there it goes. Right. And so most of what we were doing was reliability improvements, basically. And so we've got this circuit now. I just did a TikTok about it, which is a very funny phrase to say. Makes me feel very old. But if you plug in now, for all of our pedals, if you plug in the wrong power supply, it just won't turn on. But otherwise, in every other respect, the Model FET that we're making now sounds and functions identically to the one that you've got. So we kind of felt like we just got that one where we needed it to be, and now the job is making sure anyone who wants one can get one.
It's kind of one of the few instances, I've only had this happen twice, where I really wanted the original, whatever it was. Like I really want, and I still really want a Sun Model T.
Oh, sure.
Like, who doesn't,
Exactly.
But that pedal scratched the itch well enough that I was like, oh, I can calm down. Like if I really need that sound, I have it, more or less. And the same thing happened with my Yamaha CP, what is it? CP, I forget, 88. I don't remember what it's called, but it's their digital piano emulation.
Oh yeah, those are awesome.
So that scratched my Rhodes itch. Like the Rhodes sound in that is so good that I was like, okay, I don't need a Rhodes the way I did.
Yeah.
The way I did.
Well, it's the thing. Sometimes with some of these vintage pieces, it's like, great, you finally got one. Good luck ever taking it on the road or taking it out of your house, right? It's like don't get me wrong, I would also love an original Model T, but I would just be afraid of it all the time. It'd be like once a piece of gear eclipses a certain value, it's like even using it feels like you're tarnishing an investment rather than using a tool that's meant to be performed with, right? And so that's why we're always like, the Model FET is 90% of the tone of a Model T for 10% of the price, maybe less than 10% these days. I don't even know what a Model T goes for.
I mean, even the beta leads have skyrocketed. I think I bought my beta lead combo for $600 like a few years ago. And I don't know the last time I saw one under 1,000.
No, I believe it.
It's insane. Actually, mine belonged to I got it from my brain has totally failed on me. Wow, I haven't had that happen in a little while. Like just like click, we're not gonna remember any of the things that where you were trying to go with
404 memory not found.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Got Thunder Road guitars.
Oh, nice.
Here in Portland. That's where I got it. But yeah, you were speaking about dealers, and we're getting close to the end, and I have a few other things I want to touch on. But retailers are not something you really dealt with before. So how has that experience been, and what would you say to any aspiring builders that's looking to work with more retailers?
Sure. So I would say, we had been keeping retailers at arm's length. We had worked with kind of a select few, mostly for international stuff. One of my favorite dealers that we work with is Joe's Pedals in the UK. Joe has been buying pedals from us for quite some time, and for a lot of people, they feel better getting it from him than they do shipping from us, especially with all of the VAT changes and Brexit and everything. He's really helped us navigate that situation. But so one of the things we realized was, we've got our audience of people. There are folks who have been with us, some of whom for a really long time, who know what we're about and know what we're doing. But at this point, especially right now, it's really a matter of getting our stuff into the hands of more people, especially now that we have the production capacity to be doing that. And this kind of comes back to like the business related thing. For a long time, I could just throw pedals up on the internet and say, "Have at it, folks. Okay, cool, whatever." But now we're trying to really kind of cement our place in the industry as somebody with as a company with a reputation for making stuff that is high tech as far as guitar pedals go, or at least somewhat sophisticated in its engineering. I don't know the best way to phrase this, but we're trying to say, okay, we're offering something that is over-engineered and is a little bit off the beaten path. It's not the same stuff that you're getting, but also these are useful tools that you can use for a huge range of genres, and you can trust it when you're on the stage or in the studio. And, I kind of felt like, okay, the social media algorithms have been changing in ways that are always difficult to anticipate. And we ultimately we're just trying to get ourselves out there more. With this shop, which with our increased throughput, eventually there is going to be a ceiling of what direct sales can accomplish. And so we've just been, we had a list of dealers who had hit us up, and we said, "Hey, look, I'm not sure if we can get anything to you right now, but maybe someday when we've got more capacity." And that's where we're at now. So is just trying to sort of meet that demand. And there are lots of really great small shops in the industry. And I think about the relationship that I have with Stompbox Sonic here in Boston. And I think, well, shoot, there's probably folks in every major city, and even a lot of not major cities, who've got a shop like this that they have a good relationship with. And that's their primary point of contact for what's cool, what's new, what's interesting in the industry. Right. Mm-hmm. Like how many folks are just, maybe on their way home from work on a Friday, it's payday, and they say, well, what's the cool new pedal that came out? In the last 6 months, and they go to their local shop, and there's something kind of nice about saying, oh, well, there's a Longsword or a Model Fet like right there in the case with all the other cool stuff. So it's just a different way of looking at it. It's a little bit of a business move. It's a little bit of community building. It's a little bit of marketing, but it's been fun. We've enjoyed kind of giving it a shot.
Nice. Yeah. The local shop thing I think is important, and I used to have some better relationships with the local shops, but like with the shutdown and everything, some of that went away. And then some of my relationships at those shops, they left for one reason or another.
Sure.
And so like now I'm finding myself in this weird spot where I've got Strum and I've got, Black Book guitars are still there, but like, it's just this weird thing where, my people have moved on.
Right.
And now I don't have I used to have go-tos, and I don't have that quite as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the future. I'm like being real cryptic right now because I don't want to spill the beans on one of my friend's projects, but
that's really exciting.
It should be something I can point you towards in the future, both you, John, and the listeners, hopefully.
Awesome.
Soon-ish. But all that's to say, thank you so much for coming on. We've gotten to about the end of the main episode here, and I've introduced a few things since the last time you've came on that we should get to. But first, this is your chance to tell a few thousand people anything you want to tell them. If you want to give a shout out to your uncle, Joe, or you want to plug something, you want to say anything, this is your chance to do it.
All right, we're going to go a little off the beaten path here. one of my best friends, my friend Dave, has been working on a tabletop card game for a really long time. And there's a surprising amount of overlap between folks who play, Magic or Hearthstone or some of these other games and the guitar pedal world. And so pretty much any chance I get, I'm like, I'm gonna plug my friend Dave's card game because I've been talking about pedals for an hour or posting about pedals for a month or whatever. So my friend Dave has developed this game called Trials of the Eldar. It's just coming out of alpha right now. He's got an Instagram with all kinds of resources if you want to play the game online or print a beta testing deck or what have you. So yeah, that's at Trials of the Eldar, ELDAR on Instagram. So
all right,
yeah, so yeah, he deserves a shout out.
That's awesome. I love that. That sounds like a good time.
Cool.
You're right. There is a lot of crossover because suddenly I'm interested. Tell me more.
That's what I like to hear.
That's awesome. All right, John, for the final segments of the podcast. This is the one that's new for you. What is your favorite boss pedal?
Oh man. Okay. RV3 is my favorite.
Oh wow. The RV3.
I can tell you two reasons. One, Sigur Rós. Two, Johnny Greenwood.
That's all you really need.
That's all you really need, right? I mean, it's that cold metallic reverb, just these like really dense reflections and a great tone control. It sounds good before or after Dirt, but it's like if you want to do that like washy tremolo pick post rock thing, like that is just the pedal for it. I love the RV3.
RV3. I've only played the RV2, so
the 2 is also really, really good. But if you can ever you can still find a 3 for like $100. So highly recommend snagging one if you ever see one pop up used.
I will.
Heck yeah.
I'll put that on the list right there with the PS3 and the DSD2, which I just found out about. I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, those are so good.
I've got a whole list of like must buy boss pedals right now from this segment alone.
Nice.
So here we go. All right, final question, and I'm sure I asked you this before, but it's been a long time, and maybe your preferences have changed. But what is your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh man, you're killing me. It's a very difficult question to answer, Blake.
I know. It's not easy.
Well, I've eaten a lot of pizza in the last 4 years since my last segment. I'm gonna say the Nick Fury at what? Oh my God, what's the name of the pizza place in Salem? This is gonna kill me. I'm absolutely now. It's my turn to have the brain disease. Hold please. I literally need to look this up because this
Fury,
is
Salem pizza. I'm doing the same thing. Here we go. Flying Saucer?
Flying Saucer, that's the place. So yeah, so the Nick Fury at Flying Saucer Pizza. It's it's a buffalo chicken mac and cheese pizza. It's heinous. You can eat it like once a year. But that with some of their garlic knots on the side, so good. And they also make vegan pizzas, so all of your friends can come along.
There you go. Perfect. That sounds delightful. Now I have to go to Salem.
I
didn't know I never needed to go to Salem, but apparently I need to go to Salem.
Salem is cool. Like the witch stuff is like a little skeevy, but like there are great few museums over there. It's by the water, so it's beautiful. And if you're lucky, you might run into Zach from EAE there. So Zach and his partner Cam both work here. So good folks.
That's awesome. Right on, dude. This is a blast. You can probably slide over to the premium content here now. But Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great to catch up, and man, I'm stoked to be talking to you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. For John, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, there you have it, folks. I know I say that every episode, but I don't know what else to say. You do have it. You have the main episode. It's been absorbed into your brain. You heard the things. You absorbed all of the nonsense. But you need more? Do you really need more? Sure you do. And in this case, John and I have more for you over on Patreon or the Apple subscription. So if you want to subscribe and get more episodes beamed to your ears every week, you can simply go to patreon.com/tonemob and sign up there. Or if you're an Apple user, you can click that subscription button. Hey, why not, right? That's not a bad way to go. It's real easy. It's right there. and I get that extra content, and it helps support the show just as much. So thank you to everyone that has done that over the years. I can't tell you how massive of a help that is. It really is like just enormous. It helps so much. But if you can't do that, I totally understand. But if you could share this episode with a friend, I know these are the things I ask for on every single episode. All of the episodes, I'm always asking you to share it because that's what keeps it going. People listening to it. If you weren't tuned in right now, there's no way I would be able to get the guests that I get. There's no way I'd be able to do this at all. So thank you so much simply for choosing to spend your time with me today. I super appreciate it. And I will talk to you as soon as I possibly can. I hope you have a good week. Take care. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.